Welcome to Conquering Your Clownfish, a podcast dedicated to transforming disabilities into special abilities. I'm your host, Brady Murray. Welcome to the Conquering Your Clownfish podcast. I'm thrilled to introduce our special guest, Nicole Cowles. Nicole is a proud mother of two remarkable children. Her daughter, Peyton, is 4 years old and has Down syndrome. Alongside her is her 2-year-old son, Ashton, who has a rare brain malformation known as polymicrogyria. This is what causes him to have cerebral palsy. Nicole passionately shares their inspiring journey with the world and hopes that both her children will realize and achieve their dreams in life. Nicole, welcome to the show.
Yes, thank you for having me on.
So this is super fun. I learned two new words today, polymicrogyria, right?
Yes.
Okay, I got that one. And I also learned how to say Cowles spelled completely differently. And so Nicole's last name is spelled Cowles, and that's how you get Cowles. And so that is way fun. Two fun facts right there.
Yes. Love it. Thank you.
So this is a very unique episode, a special episode. You have two children, and both of your children have a disability. And this has created a path and a life for you and your husband that you probably didn't expect a number of years ago. Is that fair to say?
When my daughter was born, it was the prime time of COVID, 2020.
Yeah.
We'll just start with her because she's first. She was a birth diagnosis of Down syndrome, and we had no indicators in utero that she was going to have Down syndrome, except for one. She had a stot on her heart, and so my OB was like, oh, it could mean that she has Down syndrome, or it could be a calcium spot, and it goes away, and we see it all the time, and it's fine. So my husband and I did have that really hard conversation, like, what if she does have Down syndrome? We both said we were going to love this child no matter what. And so we were like, okay, and then thinking, then it was all the craziness happening. I didn't stress. And then, my OB was like, oh, your age. I was 22.
First child.
I was 23. I was 23 at the time. She was like, oh, your age is good. So what I knew about Down syndrome then was that, oh, you have to be older, and they had to run in the family and stuff. And I was like, well, we don't have any of that. So, what are the chances of that actually happening? So we didn't stress it, and neither did any of the medical team. They didn't stress it either. So lo and behold, here we are, 2020, and she was born, and it was the best birth I could ever have. My water broke at home. I labored at home. And we went in, and within 6 hours, she was out, and it was great. I mean, everything else leading up to her birth was perfect. And then after is when it went downhill. She would turn blue in the face, and they wheeled her off to the NICU, and they said, oh, yeah, we think your daughter has Down syndrome. And I was like, why? No, there's no way. And I did look at her when she was born. She looks a little different, but I didn't, I just gave birth. I couldn't believe it. So
right.
My husband, I said, do you need to go with her? And so he went down to the NICU, and everybody was just, in there. And then all of a sudden there was nobody there. And I was just left in silence. And I called him. I said, look, I think she's going to be fine. I need you up here with me. I just getting emotional just thinking about it, because it was traumatic in that aspect, And we went down to the NICU. We went and saw her, and I loved her. And it was going to be okay. She was just perfect, and that's all I needed in my life. Is
yeah. How did Brandon handle it?
He did get a little teary-eyed. He always puts off the strong man and being supportive and stuff like that. He handled it well, I think. I think after, especially when we got out of the NICU, after 12 days in the NICU, and we went home, we're like, okay, we were very sensitive to everything. And we kind of just went in waves with it, but he actually handled it really better than I think we both did. I think it was tough, because again, it was 2020. Didn't know anything about Down syndrome. So it was just all a learning curve, but we jumped in it pretty fast. I mean, we started services right away and just anything to support her. And with time, of course, with time heals, right? So I knew everything was going to be fine, and then I started building this community. I really want to talk about community. I mean, it's amazing here. We have so much. We have a Gigi's Playhouse here, and that was actually in the works of being built in that time that she was born and stuff like that. And so we helped and did that. So Gigi's Playhouse, and we have tons of local moms that we all have community with each other, and we lean on each other a lot. That aspect of like, oh, my kid's doing this. What's your kid doing? What should I do with this situation? And so that's been very nice to have.
Yeah.
Is the community in the Down syndrome community. You know what
Absolutely.
I mean? There's just so much here. There's so much. And online, online is so much. I have so many online friends. It's crazy to think about. It's like, I've never met you, but we're so close, right?
Isn't that funny how that worked?
Yes.
And so when you found out that you were pregnant, I'm curious your feelings about a disability or possibly having another child with Down syndrome or a disability. What were your feelings when you found out you were pregnant?
So we were nervous. I mean, we were nervous, and I was like, there's no way that this could happen again. She's like, it was like fastest. You know what I mean? Or, and not that I would ever, like, if it was another child with trisomy 21 or anything, I mean, we were up for it, but like, what are the odds? Because you always see like other people having kids and after their kids with Down syndrome and they're typical developing. And so I just wasn't like a thought. I mean, it was a scare, but it wasn't a thought. Like, I'm like, okay, we're going to be okay. It's going to be fine. Like Peyton's going to learn from this next child and stuff like that. It was our thought process. And that's why we really had them so close together. I mean, I was pregnant like within a year after Peyton because we just wanted to keep them close.
To your credit, you and Brandon have one child and that child has Down syndrome. And so in any type of a diagnosis, there is a period of mourning. There is loss for the life that you would have expected. To imagine that there was just a feeling and a hope of like, okay, we love Peyton so much and we are so excited. You find out that you're having a boy. In fact, I'm curious, when did you receive diagnosis on your second child?
On Ashton? It was actually 7 months after he was born when he received his diagnosis.
So I'm just setting this up. Like you have your child. You have a boy, right? You have a girl, you have a boy, you have all these hopes, these dreams, these aspirations.
Correct.
Born. There's no diagnosis of Down syndrome. Everything seemed okay.
Good. Yes.
And then take us down that path from there.
So when we had our 20-week ultrasound with my son, we did have a huge scare. They said that he has echogenic bowels. I'm not sure if you know what that is. It's just meaning that like they check the bowels and if it like the same color as the bone, that is echogenic.
Yeah.
And so you only see that when I looked it up, in trisomy 21 or genetic disorder cases.
Oh, my goodness.
Yes. So I had a talk with a genetic counselor and they said, trisomy 21 was mentioned a couple times and there's multiple other things that could have been a fluke. So we actually had a high risk OB appointment, ultrasound within like 2 days after, and they rechecked and they said he was cleared. He was fine. It was a fluke. I was like, oh, okay, thank goodness. Like it was a huge scare. I was like, well, like we would welcome another child with trisomy 21, of course, but everything was good. We followed up at 32 weeks with another ultrasound and his head was measuring 3 weeks behind. I was a little nervous. I was like, what does this mean? And my OB again, the same OB, she was like, and I love her. She's great. But she was like, oh, he's just got to have a small head. I was like, okay, I have a smaller head. Brandon's head is a little bit bigger. I was like, no worries. That's fine. So after he was born, he did have the cord wrapped around his neck. He came out blue, as much babies do. And he took a little minute to get screaming. And so that was nerve wracking. I mean, my daughter's birth was perfect and beautiful. And my son's was traumatic. It was the worst that anything that was going wrong was going wrong. And so that with being the cord wrapped around the neck, and that was what I thought applied to cerebral palsy, because as we go on, he had a seizure shortly after birth.
Yep.
And I suspected it was a seizure, and I reported it because it happened a few times. They said, no, that doesn't look like a seizure. And if you want to be sure, we can go down to the NICU. I was like, oh my God, we're doing this again. We're going to go down to the NICU. I freaked out. I was like, okay, let's just watch him and see what happens. He didn't have any more of those episodes. So I'm like, okay, we're in the clear. He was screaming. He screamed that entire night, the first night he was born. He wouldn't stop screaming and he wouldn't stop nursing. And so they didn't think anything of it. Everything else was, fine. His vitals were fine. Everything was fine. So they sent us on our way within 2 days. And we were home and everything seemed normal. There was nothing that seemed out of place with him. No more episodes like I talked about and what I saw. So
did you get, a couple weeks in and you're like, whew, okay.
Yeah, I did. I thought everything was fine. Seriously. But the only thing was like, she was super colicky. I mean, that's what I thought the screaming was. And so we were trying to figure that out, and I had to go dairy free with breastfeeding and stuff so we were just trying to figure out other things with him that it didn't seem, you know what I mean, too alarming, until like around 4 months, I was just like looking at him and I was like, there's something up here. You know what I mean? I was still on edge, and I didn't know if I was being on edge because of my daughter, and everything that we went through with her, or if this was like validated edginess that I was having with him. And so when it came around 4 or 5 months, I'm like, okay, he's not sitting up. His head control is not the best. I'm like, I was like, what's happening? You know what I mean? And so I reached out to the pediatrician, and the pediatrician was like, okay, she's like, what are your concerns? And I did a lot of research. at that point, because I was like, what is this? And I thought because the cord wrapped around his neck caused cerebral palsy, because everything was leaning towards cerebral palsy when I was looking it up online. Yep. So I kind of mentally already had a diagnosis for him in my head. I knew what it was. Like, I was telling my husband, I was telling my family, and they were like, oh, Nicole, you're just overthinking it. You need to like wait it out. And so I pushed for an MRI, because if you don't know, MRIs don't happen with cerebral palsy within the first year or two. They wait it out. They're like, let's wait and see. And I told him, I was like, no, like, let's get this looked into. I really want an MRI done. And so we got the MRI done when he was 7 months old. And I for sure thought there was going to be like lack of oxygen shown in his brain. And it was complete opposite. He had a rare brain malformation, and it's polymicrogyria, and it affects his frontal lobes. And this is how the neurologist explained it to me. It affects his frontal lobes and it goes to the sides, and then his optical lobes were spared. So it was bilateral, and I just couldn't believe it. It was like not a diagnosis that I was thinking, I was going to get. I totally thought it was from birth, and it wasn't. It was in utero when this happened. Yep. And then it just made sense. And then the echogenic bowel, you could see that too with that diagnosis, and, the small head, it kind of all makes sense.
Did they give, like, how rare is this?
I don't actually know. People can have polymicrogyria and not even know it their entire life.
Really?
And until they have a seizure, and then they do an MRI and they find like a smallest patch of it in their brain. And they had no idea. So that's how functioning you can be with this diagnosis. Yeah. Or you can have like bilateral and, have cerebral palsy in that instance. It goes in so many different directions. And on the support pages, you see a lot of different abilities in people with this diagnosis.
So Nicole, you have a 2-year-old in Peyton, and she's beautiful, and she has Down syndrome. Yes. And now you have this 7-month-old amazing boy who you have been worried, and now you actually have a diagnosis. You have two children. I mean, just a couple of years apart.
I was sad. I mean, to be honest, it's the same process as any diagnosis. I was sad. Really? I mourned it for sure. And as time went on, I was like, okay, when we first got his diagnosis, I'm like, hey, we're just going to do all the therapies. We're going to do exactly what we did with Peyton. We're going to get him going, and he's going to be fine. And the more I go down and the older he gets, it's not the same as Peyton. You know what I mean? And that's a hard thing to realize, because, this child was supposed to teach my daughter with Down syndrome things, and it's the the opposite. My daughter is teaching my son things, and that's fine. But it was a shocker, you know what I mean? And that, he's going to be in a wheelchair, you know what I mean? And having to accept those things have been a little bit harder. It's completely different. Peyton, we know Peyton's going to be successful and do all the things that she's meant to be and have. But with Ashton, it's just such a huge question mark what his future will look like. The amazing thing that I learned with cerebral palsy is that they're so smart. Yeah. They're so smart, but their brain isn't connecting with their muscles. And so it looks different. You know what I mean? But he is so smart. He is so smart. He's proving me every single day that he's so smart. Even though he can't verbally tell me things, he is so smart.
Before starting to record that we've had a chance to go to a lot of orphanages throughout the world in different countries. Yeah. And, I have 2 boys that have Down syndrome. So naturally I love seeing the kids with Down syndrome, but I gotta be honest, my heart always takes me to those kids in the wheelchairs that have cerebral palsy.
Yeah.
And the thing that's unique about them is most of them are not able to communicate verbally.
Right.
Yet they communicate so well, and they do so with their eyes.
Yes.
And I remember, and in each of these cases, I take a very specific approach in just looking at them and going to them and putting my hand on their knee and talking to them. And do they communicate? And there's just something very, very special about those kids. And I just feel that with Ashton as well as you described your son.
Yeah, he's very sweet boy and he communicates with his eyes for sure. He has very good eye contact and gaze and stuff like that. And he's constantly looking for me. Like I'll walk by and he's looking over at me. You know what I mean? And then I'm like, oh, it's okay. If he's upset and he knows I'm coming for him and he gets happy and he smiles and stuff like that. It's a lot of communication with the eyes. So we are in the process of actually getting him an AAC device. And Peyton as well, which is great because I'm like, we're going to have 2 of these devices and we're both going to be doing it with the both of them and they're going to learn at the same time.
That's going to be fun.
Which is great. Peyton has a lot of words, but you can't understand it. And so I know for sure, like she'll grow out of that, but he'll have an ACC device pretty soon here. So I'm pretty excited to learn all that and do it together for the both of them. At least they're doing it together in that aspect.
So I have to ask, and totally apologize because I bet you've been asked this 1,000 times since this movie came out, but have you seen the more recent Disney movie? I forget the name of it now.
Out of my mind.
And so we watched that over the break and with me and my daughter is 19 and we just cried. Like, it's
I'm getting emotional just thinking about it because
it is so real.
Yeah, it is.
It is interesting just to observe the emotion. We both are children or parents that have children with Down syndrome, and man, they're amazing. And just the spirit and the feeling that we have as we talk about Ashton it's unique. And so I want to read a post that you did not too long ago.
Okay.
About this specifically. And let me pull this up here. So right here. This is an awesome post. This was in October. So you would have a video that has some pictures and videos of your 2 children. And you say, I can't watch this without tears in my eyes. I had this weird thought the other day that I think many of you may relate to. I feel so much more love for my children because of their different abilities. Both of my children have their own set of needs, but there is just something different, deeper kind of love. Now, correct me, I love my children no matter what, but there is just something about them that hits a different way. I know for Peyton, it's very much that extra lovable special chromosome. Like, that makes her her. I wouldn't change that for the world. Love doesn't count chromosomes. And so Andrea and I, my wife and I, we have a lot of kids as well. And each one of them, we love them so much. But I echo what you're saying, that there is something different about our children that come with differing abilities. And so can you speak to that post a little bit?
I don't have other kids that don't have disabilities. So it's kind of harder in my thought process to like I feel like this for my kids, but I feel like if I had typical children, I love my two kids. Like I just have this deeper love for them. And it's just the way for Peyton, it's the way she hugs me and loves me. It just feels a lot different than it would be with a typical child would be. You know, I have nephews and stuff like that. And then my son, the same thing. I mean, like I said, when he smiles at me and looks at me and looks me in the eyes, specifically when he just stares into me, it feels like he's staring into my soul.
That's right.
And it's just different. It's just a love that you can't describe. And I feel like it's different it would be different with a typical child. You know what I mean? And they slow me down. I would have to say, like, out of everything with my kids, they have slowed me down. I worked at a school for 10 years and I worked with 4-year-olds the same age as my daughter currently, and they're just always on the go, go, go. It's different with my kids and it slows me down and it makes me be more like present in time with them and cherish this time with them. It's just how great they are. And so
all of that, I echo it. It's so difficult to put into words, yet when you have experienced it, it is as clear as anything.
Yeah.
And it's a very unique ability that they have. It's a consecrating ability, a way to be able to take everything that is most important and most pure and make that the focal point in our lives. And that is a very, very special thing that these kids have.
Yeah. Yeah. And both Ashton, very special kids. And they show that to me and everybody around them every day, for sure.
So Nicole, you're still in, I would say, the beginning stages of this journey. You've gone a long ways and accomplished amazing things, but you still have a journey ahead of you. As you look forward into the future, what are your feelings as you look 5, 10, even 20 years down the road?
It's different for each kid. For Peyton, I see a lot of big things in her future. I think she's amazing. She's an amazing dancer and singer. I can totally see her doing dance one day and being good at that, and even modeling because she's just so cool. She got some sassy style, some moves, definitely. For Ashton, I just want him to be happy. I do think a lot of the future for him and what that's going to look like for us. And I don't mean to be sad about it, but we have to realistically, I mean, we're in the process of giving him a wheelchair and stuff like that. I try not to think too hard into the future, but I do. But I just want them to be happy, and I want them to be included is the number one thing. Is like, I just want them to feel loved and included and that they're meant to be in this world because they are. Yeah.
I would say that what you just described there is all of our hopes and aspirations and dreams for our children. And maybe for families that have children, but they're all typical children, they definitely feel that because every parent wants their child to be included. But that is such a pressing and real thing for us who have kiddos that have just differing abilities. That's a worry and that's a concern. I will share though, I remember specifically when Nash was little, that was such a heavy burden and such a weight on my shoulders. And now fast forward to with him being 17 and having experienced much of his childhood now and seeing how kids treat him and how by and large society is towards him. And I would say that I feel such a sense of gratitude and appreciation for how well his peers, his classmates, our neighbors, just society as a whole has treated my son. And I will also say that I've just seen marked improvement and increased awareness through this last decade because of much of the individuals like yourself that are willing to share that story on social media and be able to help the world to be able to see that. So I just think you're doing a great job that way.
Yeah, I share my kids on social media for this. And I share my kids and their diagnoses so that the next parent that comes looking like I was doesn't feel so alone. This is why I do it. I get a lot of comments, like I said, like, well, you're only sharing your kid for the views and everything like that. I've gotten so many comments. I'm like, no, I've been in that mom's shoes that are just looking for,
Right.
something, to connect with. And
Right.
I want to be that. I want to be that person. And I've gotten messages from many other moms that have gotten the Down syndrome diagnosis and even the cerebral palsy diagnosis. You could imagine my page is full with a lot.
Yeah.
We go back and forth. I'm like, cerebral palsy, Down syndrome, you know what I mean? I see it all. And so it's nice to be that person for somebody. That's the biggest thing. Like people were for me. So
yeah. I can relate and I understand that so much. And there is such a tremendous community online for moms that are in the Down syndrome world. I will put out there, and I'll share this. In fact, in the last couple episodes, this has come up and just continues to be a recurring thought. My heart, my thoughts also go to Brandon, to your husband. And there's actually not as much for the dads out there. And I would say that us as dads have just as much processing and just as much of a need for a listening ear and an understanding proverbial shoulder to cry on, if you may, as we process just this journey as well. And so that kind of a unique thing that I just feel a lot of work that could be done in that space as well.
Yeah, I agree. We have a huge community here. The moms and I are all very close, and we've planned trips together and stuff like that. And we're trying to do a mom's trip this next year. And my husband's like, well, what about the guys? And I was like, well, you plan your guys' trip, go out and go do it. You know what I mean? I was like, you guys need to get together just as much as the moms do, because it's true. You men have all the same feelings and the same processes that they need to go through. You know what I mean? But I think that they should plan their own guys' trip. And they
Well, I have to put a shout out. I actually found out about this at NDSC last year, that there actually is a dad's trip that happens for dads with kids that have Down syndrome. It's through the organization NDSN, National Down Syndrome Network. And they have an event called the Rockin' Dads Weekend. And so I just found out that this year is in San Diego. It's in July.
Oh, nice.
And it's all dads that have a child that has Down syndrome are getting together. So I'm planning on going to that this year.
Oh, maybe I should tell Brandon.
Totally think you should tell Brandon. So I think that's going to be a really fun event.
That will be a really fun event. I'm glad that they do that.
Yeah.
Because the dads need it too.
They do. Yep, we do.
Yeah.
Well, Nicole, you've been an amazing guest. Thank you for your insights. Thank you for being willing to share your story. And I would encourage anybody who would love to follow Nicole. We'll share her Instagram handle in the show notes. And I just highly encourage you to follow this unique journey as she raises these two amazing, amazing kids. So Nicole, thanks for being on the show.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Conquering Your Clownfish. If you liked what we discussed on the podcast today and want to continue the conversation, please visit us at conqueringyourclownfish.com. And please don't forget to subscribe.